Hello, everyone. Lindsey here, Dr. Lindsey Matthews can too. I'm your BIRTHFIT founder and CEO. And this is going to be a solo episode. This is episode number 232, Thoughts on Diastasis Rectus Abdominis, or as some may know it as Diastasis Recti, or simply DRA. Now, before we get into that, I want to thank you for listening to the podcast, listening to the BIRTHFIT podcast, and supporting us. If you've been with us this season for any previous episodes, you know that the podcast is primarily here to support our nonprofit and share the BIRTHFIT philosophy, methodology, some great speakers, and some really amazing stories. Like we had Kat's story on earlier this season, a few episodes ago. Kat sharing her twin free birth. If you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to it. It's such an inspiring story. So anyways, our nonprofit. If you have not heard about this, please go to nonprofit.birthfit.com, and there you will see that our official title, BIRTHFIT for Everyone, is a nonprofit agency providing birth doula or postpartum doula support for those in the military or those with a spouse in the military, specifically active duty. And we're so this is something near and dear to my heart as I've been trying to figure out a way to support military spouses better or show up in a different way. We get a ton of emails, requests. We've taught on military bases. The questions we get are, how can I pass my physical fitness test? Or, anything y'all can do to find me a doula in my area. Just totally random, but much needed support. So if you can, go to nonprofit.birthfit.com and you can find out a little bit more about the services and how we go about providing services. Right now, we are only providing birth doula support or postpartum doula support in the state of Texas. It's just what our capacity is right now. And we would love for you to donate. If you go to the website, you'll see a donate button on the far right. And then you just go to that page, click donate, and you can donate $5, $10, whatever contribution you want to make. If you would like to sponsor a full BIRTHFIT podcast episode, we ask that you donate $250. And whether it's your business or you choose to remain anonymous or whatever, we will definitely mention you multiple times throughout a certain podcast. So anyways, yeah, we're really excited that that's up and going now. So head to that page. If you are pregnant, if your spouse is in the military, either one of you are currently active duty, by all means, go there, fill out the survey. Hopefully we can help you out. We're eager to support military. It's near and dear to many of our hearts and inside of BIRTHFIT. So, all right, let's move on. So this episode, as I mentioned, basically is going to be thoughts and reflections, probably, some questions, hopefully stir up some questions for you in regard to diastasis rectus abdominis. There's many different names and phrases, but, I feel like this is such a hot topic. This is such a, you see the words DRA, you see the hashtag DRA, and it is like, boom, let's prey on pregnant women. Let's prey on postpartum women. So it's such a hot topic in the motherhood transition. And I also strongly believe that it's filled with or has so many misconceptions around basically what is DRA and um, how to approximate it. So let me turn off my phone. That was a vibration. That was kind of annoying. Sorry about that. Before we go any further, if you are somebody that is, I don't want to say dealing with, suffering from, but maybe you are somebody that has diastasis rectus abdominis, and you're dealing with a little bit of impairment, skin issues, lack of functionality around or in that abdominal wall, and you're not sure where to start. Maybe you're kind of at a plateau in your exercise program. I'm trying to think of different things that have come up in the office setting. Maybe you have lumbar back pain, lower back pain, or pelvic girdle pain, or organ prolapse, or urinary incontinence, which can be, seen side by side with DRA. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have DRA, but there's a strong correlation there. So I got some notes here. I want to make sure I hit everything. What I want to say first is that I strongly believe, and our methodologies and philosophies here at BIRTHFIT promote, or we define DRA as an inability to manage our own internal pressure system. This is a sign, this is a symptom of core and pelvic floor dysfunction. If we take a step back, and here at BIRTHFIT, we define the core as this canister that is in the center of our body. The top of the canister is the diaphragm, the bottom of the canister is the pelvic floor, and then we have muscles and fascia and connective tissue kind of all around it. Some of the big abdominal muscle players are the rectus abdominis, the internal and external obliques, the transverse abdominis, and then for sure the diaphragm, for sure the pelvic floor. And then, I also like to say the muscles of the back. So you've got your lats, you've got your erector spinae, the muscles that kind of run up and down the spine. You've got your QL, you've got all these other muscles, but it's a whole canister of muscles, and within that canister there is a pressure system. So DRA is a sign, it is a symptom of overall core and pelvic floor dysfunction. And for me, this means there is a leak in the system. There is something off in the system, somewhere, somehow. Because if there is abdominal separation, and DRA specifically is that separation of the linea alba that runs from your xiphoid process down to your pubic bone, in between the muscle bellies of the rectus abdominis muscle. So when that is separated or stretched out, there is a leak in the system somewhere. There is, muscles are not playing the game together. There is an inability for whoever it is that has DRA, us, the subject, there's an inability to manage their own internal pressure system. Now, I know that's a lot of info right there, so just pause the recording if you have to, do whatever you need to. Research is terrible, like scant at best. just not a lot of research out there. And, I do think we live in a time where more and more research will become available. And it's, especially for those of us that work in the women's health space, it's up to us to stay on the forefront of research, to question everything, and to also at the same time use our intuition. And what the heck is our gut saying? Does this feel appropriate in my body? So whenever I first entered the birth world 10 years ago, um, I started BIRTHFIT 10 years ago, so it's probably a little bit before that I started doing some research. And it took me freaking 5 years to basically write the outline, create the curriculum for the initial BIRTHFIT coach course, which I launched in January of 2017. So I started writing this at least 5 years prior. And there was such a gap for me as somebody that went through undergrad as a pre-med student, studied biology, and then I decided not to go to medical school, and I decided to go to chiropractic school. And then at the time, right after chiropractic school, I did all of the courses and seminars that were offered through the ICPA diplomat program. I did not go on to, do the test or any of that to receive my diplomate, but I took all of the courses and plus some. The gap for me was that there was nobody, no organization talking about the core, the true anatomical core for a human being. Like none of it felt intuitively right for me. What I got from different things was Band-Aid, quick fixes, hammer, nail mentality. And I wanted more. I wanted big picture. So long story short, I came across DNS, Dynamic Neuromuscular Stabilization. And this is out of the Prague School of Rehab. And back in the day, there's probably, very few seminars on DNS at that time. I want to say it's like 2015, 2014. Yeah, like not a ton of opportunities. However, I was lucky. I was living in California at the time, and I was lucky enough to find a seminar and get into one with Dr. Michael Rintinala, who still hosts seminars. And if you want to go to a DNS seminar, be sure to check out his website. And his last name is Rintala, Rintala. Yes. And so, yeah, that seminar blew my mind. And it showed me, specifically, it got into more of developmental kinesiology than I've ever gotten into. And it showed me basically how we as humans learn to move from a baby all the way to a bipedal weight-bearing mammal. Now, I know you're thinking, where the heck is she going with this? This is important. And I will keep this brief, I promise. I'm trying my very best to keep the podcast very short, efficient, and straight to the point. So, what I learned in DNS through the in-depth developmental kinesiology courses were that the core, the breath, that is the origins of all movement. All movement can and is core work. And everything starts in our core. And even if you go on to take a CrossFit Level 1 seminar, you learn that all movement is from core to extremity. Just think about that. Our core is our shock absorber. It's our power igniter, our translator. It's also holds tons of emotions. This is important, especially for women. There's at least 3 chakras that line up right here: the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus, all in this core space. All movement originates from the core, and all core work originates or has our breath at the foundation. So that was huge for me. It was mind-blowing as somebody that has experienced musculoskeletal injuries throughout my athletic life, and as somebody that has experienced asthma issues, so breathing challenges. It was a whole new world. A door had opened for me, and I embraced the curiosity. So anyways, going back to DNS, so I'll try to stay on topic. Developmental kinesiology. All babies, when left uninterrupted with a little motivation, no matter where they are at in this world, they're in Texas, Japan, Russia, Italy, wherever, all babies, all humans will go through this sequential movement motor milestones. And it's so important that we all go through these motor milestones because they build upon the previous one. They unlock parts of our brains. It just gets more and more complex. And it's freaking, I mean, God knew exactly what he was doing when he designed this magical, just human being. So anyways, developmental kinesiology, hitting the motor milestones, one, then the next one, and so on. So babies are born with diastasis rectus abdominis. Babies are born with ab separation. I know that might be a surprise, but just write that down. Take note. If you have a little one and they're, probably less than 3 months, you can see the coning happening when you lay them on their backs, and they're learning to stabilize. They're learning to use their diaphragm, which is the muscle of respiration and stabilization. They're learning to use their diaphragm to stabilize against the ground when they're first here. And they move their arms, they move their hands, move their legs. So they're sort of in this dead bug position. They're sort of in this happy baby-esque position. This is why we have the BIRTHFIT basics. This is why we have 15 movements and poses that are modeled after developmental kinesiology. We as humans have all, hopefully, approximated our DRA in the first year or so of life. So I know I am so hopeful we can do that again. And that is why we use the BIRTHFIT basics. So a few points on the developmental milestones, developmental kinesiology. Happy baby, dead bug, that's usually the first position we hit in BIRTHFIT, modeled after these milestones. Second position we prioritize is a side plank option. And I say option because it's not the side plank that, exercise enthusiasts might be thinking of, where you're up on your hand and up on the side of your foot. We're literally on our elbow and our knee, just like babies do. And I promise you, it is way more challenging then you even have thought it is a challenge. We breathe in these positions, in the bottom of the position and the top of the position. Then we go through the movement. So side plank options. After side plank, we start to embrace a high oblique sit. Then we go into a shin box flow. Then we go into a tabletop. We start to embrace a bird dog movement. We start to embrace some crawling, forwards, backwards, side to side. And we for sure get into some high bear crawling. Then we embrace a squat or a tripod, pulling ourselves up to stand. And we've gone through that whole sequence: BIRTHFIT basics, developmental kinesiology, movement milestones, but we've hit all of those movements. Babies do not have a one-trick pony, a one exercise solution that fixes, and I say fixes in quotations, fixes their DRA. They go through those movement milestones building upon the previous one. They have to, that body has to, basically be able to manage their own internal pressure system at level 1 before going to level 2, before going to level 3, before level 4, adding load, so on. Pretty amazing. So we start with stabilizing against the ground. Then we stabilize, use our same side, IPSY side, for stability, support in that side plank option. Then we have way less support when we're in like a tabletop or like the bird dog movement. We don't have the ground to support our back. Now we have basically 4 points of contact, and we're, challenging that system. It's pretty freaking awesome. This is why I strongly believe the BIRTHFIT Basics postpartum program should be at the foundation, the first thing every woman does movement-wise postpartum. This is why I think the BIRTHFIT Basics postpartum program is the most important, if not the best program out there to lay a solid foundation from which to build from. Now, yes, write that down. Go get the program. I will be doing it. Absolutely. We are weight-bearing mammals. We are bipedal. We are weight-bearing. So at some point, we have to introduce load. We have to introduce load. We have to challenge the system with force, because this will demand more of the tissue. When we load more tissue, we get more collagen, we get more functioning collagen. However, we have to have this kind of Goldilocks amount. So everybody has a different threshold, and we talk about this threshold when we're working on healing core and pelvic floor dysfunction within BIRTHFIT. Everybody's threshold is different. So we may know the threshold upper limit. We operate below that and try to push the needle a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Okay, so time out. I'm getting ahead of myself. So DRA, core and pelvic floor, a sign and symptom of core and pelvic floor dysfunction. When we know there is core and pelvic floor dysfunction going on, we take a bird's eye view at BIRTHFIT, and we look at 3 things. We look at patterns, we look at nourishment, and we look at mindset. Those three things. Patterns include your breath and your movement patterns. Do you have healthy movement patterns, or do you have compensatory movement patterns? Breathing. We teach 2 breaths at BIRTHFIT. We teach the regular human diaphragm breath and then the stability breath. Beyond those 2 things, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever breath exercises you want. You can do Wim Hof every day. You can practice vacuum breathing. You can do Kundalini. You can do fire breathing, whatever you want. But none of that is a stability breath. You need a stability breath. We teach 2 basic human breaths at BIRTHFIT, and they are the diaphragm breath and the stability breath. Our goal at BIRTHFIT is to create, to create is probably the best word, to create a strong and dynamic core. You need 2 things in order for the strong and dynamic core to exist. And I've hinted at those 2 things already. You need task-specific intra-abdominal pressure, and you need, number 2, all the muscles playing the game together, all the muscles harmonizing. Sounds simple, it's not easy. So our goal, let's repeat this, our goal is a strong and dynamic core, one that is flexible, not rigid, one that can absorb shock and flow into the next movement. One that is flexible and also has like just ground shaking strength. You watch some of the better movers in, let's say, a strongman competition, maybe not some of the bigger guys, but the ones that are more agile, as you know, that world's becoming a little bit more mainstream. Some of the best movers have a super flexible spine where they can flex, extend, laterally bend, move all over the place to embrace these odd objects. That is hella core strength. That is amazing. Some of the power lifters have the ability, have mastered the art of creating this stability breath. Whenever I see a 6-pack muscle or 6-pack on 6-pack on top of 6-pack, abs for days, I 100% of the time see compensatory patterns, see dysfunction somewhere. Aesthetics are one of the biggest contributors to core and pelvic floor dysfunction. Sport-specific training is another big contributor, where we're only training in one plane of motion. If you're only a cyclist or only a runner, or specifically only doing CrossFit movements, you're only training in the sagittal plane of motion. You've got to be able to move and train and breathe and do everything in all planes of motion. Those with DRA, from what I've observed, they cannot transfer force across midline. The sagittal plane movement is fine, but the rotational strength and control is lost. So you could run, you could get back running, marathons, high volume running, but that's not going to fix your DRA. I say fix with quotations. The shock transfer of power, transfer of force has not healed. It's not available. It's not there. So just think about that. Biking, living in predominantly CrossFit world type of movements. Something to think about. Okay, where was I going with this? Oh, the two breaths. Yes, thank you. So, diaphragm breath and stability breath. The diaphragm breath, basic human breath. When you inhale through your nose, your diaphragm and your pelvic floor lower together. The core expands, your rib cage expands 360 degrees, or that's the goal. As you exhale, the diaphragm, pelvic floor, everything just naturally returns back to neutral. So they slightly raise again. However, there's no sucking up and in. There's no pulling your belly button to your spine. There's no sucking your pelvic floor up and in. Everything is just, it's like you don't think, you just breathe. You breathe in, everything lowers. As you exhale, everything naturally returns back to neutral. With a stability breath, the stability breath, which is task-specific intra-abdominal pressure, we just prefer the word stability breath better. It's a little easier on the tongue. The breath starts the same way. You inhale, everything lowers and expands. However, on the exhale, those muscles, that expansion, you're trying to maintain that expansion. You're trying to meet the resistance that was created within that internal pressure system. So if you are thinking, if you're breathing in 360 degrees and you're about to bear hug a sandbag or lift a heavy deadlift, or somebody's about to punch you in the stomach, how would you breathe? And how would your exhale feel? You would brace. You would prepare for that. You would not at all suck your belly button to your spine. At least I know I wouldn't. I would not go up to, 350-pound barbell to deadlift and suck everything up and in. That does not feel great for me. And I just cringe thinking about what's going to happen to my spine. So you're creating this task-specific intra-abdominal pressure. You're managing your own internal pressure system. Now, I said task-specific. So this is going to change. This is going to be different. What is task-specific early postpartum might be like a personal best, a PR. If you're lifting a diaper bag, an infant carrier, and 2 bags of groceries, that's going to require probably a lot more generated pressure and power in the freaking 6 to 8 weeks postpartum than it would 8 to 10 weeks postpartum, because it's a different time, it's a different season. Your threshold has changed. Your threshold is, your capacity is a lot more. Hopefully you've done the BIRTHFIT basics. So diaphragm breath, stability breath. Now, I mentioned all muscles playing together, so harmonizing together. You absolutely need this on the stability breath. There's no chance that our pelvic floor works in isolation. There's no reason ever for our TVA, our transverse abdominis, to work in isolation. We might intentionally focus on a muscle or two. However, keep in mind, even when we are trying to isolate a muscle or two or get intentional with a muscle, they're not operating. That is not the only thing happening in your body. There are studies that show the diaphragm and the pelvic floor always do things together. They never work. Like anytime the diaphragm is doing its thing, pelvic floor is doing something. So keep that in mind. I want to say a side note about the TVA. TVA is like transverse abdominis, is like a hot muscle or a trendy muscle that is like, activate your TVA, heal your DRA, or fix. Usually it says fix. That's not always the case. The transverse abdominis is a muscle that is a deep core muscle that the fibers run longitudinally underneath the rectus abdominis. This muscle is so freaking important for helping to create internal pressure. So if you have joined a program that says no to internal pressure, but activate your TVA, then they have no idea what the heck is going on. I've seen that out there. Your TVA is, like I said, that a very important deep core muscle that basically runs the entire anterior abdominal wall from your hip bones, inguinal canal, up to the xiphoid process in your lower ribs. So it's just like a belly hug. If you want to focus on the TVA, specifically the lower TVA, you're thinking about your hip bones almost coming together on your exhale. And at the same time, maintaining that expansion that you created on the inhale. If you're focusing on the TVA that's a little higher than the umbilicus, then you're focusing on those lower ribs coming together on the exhale while still maintaining the expansion. You're not sucking in. This is not a sucking in. Not a sucking in at all. And I like to think of it as those muscles hugging kind of the front of the belly. At no point when I'm breathing out or exhaling like that is my belly button being sucked to my spine, or is my pelvic floor being sucked up and in. I can do that TVA hug without any of that shenanigans, you know? So I wanted to point that out. TVA is crucial for internal or intra-abdominal pressure, helping to regulate your internal pressure system. Okay, so I mentioned patterns, mindset, and nourishment. Nourishment is huge. We often see, especially with women that want to fix, and I say fix, their DRA in quotations again, and I'll get to that in a second, start to limit their calories, count their macros, because they almost correlate it with a diet issue. At no point postpartum, the immediate postpartum, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months even, should you be dieting or counting macros or counting calories. This is a time for nourishment, looking at what you put in your body and on your body, and are you eating things that support connective tissue? Are you eating protein, animal protein? Are you consuming collagen, things like amino acids, bone broths, gelatin gummies? Like all of that is super important for supporting your connective tissue. Are you staying hydrated? Do you get enough electrolytes and minerals when you're consuming your water? Big stuff there. And then also with nourishment, are you nourishing your soul? Are you taking care of yourself? We want to avoid depletion and exhaustion. That's not the chapter for this. You can deplete yourself later on in life, but not on our watch. You can deplete yourself later on. Yeah. But please don't. Mindset. So this is a big one. I would say, and I'll read some research in a minute, but there are a lot of women that come to the office, come to us at BIRTHFIT, come to me postpartum, whether it be 2 years, 5 years. It's after the initial postpartum period. they originally went back to their regularly scheduled exercise routine too soon. There was, oh man, just the phrase that comes up is like trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to check the boxes, do all the things. There was very little surrendering to the motherhood transition, surrendering to what was being asked of her emotionally. And I say that because almost everything has, yes, everything like physical has an emotional, mental component. So we usually do have to do some big emotional work, some deep emotional healing. And I would encourage you to check out the book Eastern Body, Western Mind, and just investigate those 3 chakras that I mentioned, the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus, and go through some of those exercises. That's a really great place to start. And yeah, emotions will come up, tears will come up. Tears are so beneficial. They're so cleansing and clearing and absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary to freaking level up. Trust me. I've cried so much in my life. And I think, it's allowed me to open doors that I wouldn't otherwise. I would have been too rigid or too stiff, to open that door. So anyways, patterns, nourishment, and mindset is how we approach every core and pelvic floor dysfunction. Okay, so a few things about DRA. Let me go back up here. DRA is basically defined as the interrectus distance that is 2 fingers, 2 finger breaths, 2 millimeters, 2 somethings. Nobody agrees. Or more. That's kind of where we're at. DRA was defined as 16 millimeters at 2 centimeters below the umbilicus. That was one study. Let me see another one. 2 finger breaths, either 4.5 centimeters above or 4.5 centimeters below. Yeah. The few studies that are out there say that DRA is present on almost all pregnant women by full term. So, for me, I'm like, well, how do they define that? Because nobody can really agree on 2 fingers breaths. Anyways, what we look for at BIRTHFIT when we're assessing DRA is functionality, width, and depth. And specifically when we're looking at this postpartum, and I don't particularly love to look at this postpartum until after 4 weeks, somewhere in between like 5 and 8 weeks postpartum. But we're looking at those 3 things. When I'm looking at somebody in the prenatal phase, the prenatal chapter, I'm looking at her position and the movement that's going on. So for instance, the other day I was up on the pull-up bar and I was about to do some strict pull-ups. However, I noticed as I started to activate and like pull myself, like that initial activation, there was some coning that happened. And it wasn't a very rigid cone situation. I stepped onto the box that was beside me. I reset And then I reset my breath, and I got super intentional with my stability breath, and I tried it again. Now, this time it was actually much less, um, like the coning, like I said, the coning wasn't that prominent, but even this time it was much less than before. So it was almost like kind of diffuse over my abdominal wall. So I was able to almost, I don't want to say mitigate the issue with my breath. And that is the goal. That is what we do. That is what we suggest with all women that are training prenatally. When you notice coning happening, the ridge, the dome, and it's usually right below the rib cage to somewhere above the umbilicus. When you see that, can you stop the movement, reset, address your breath, maybe lower the reps, lower the load, and go on? Can you try it again? Now, did that help the situation? Did that lessen the coning action? Because I, for one, don't necessarily believe that avoiding all movements is absolutely necessary. But I do believe that if you've reached your threshold, so say the coning was like super rigid on me, um, and maybe I had some back pain or something, then that might be way too much for my system. Instead, it wasn't. It was just simple, a little doming, probably is a better word. I reset, was able to kind of diffuse the situation with a better stability breath, and I lowered the reps. So I saw my threshold basically, and I worked beneath that or within that capacity. Um, Now, let me go back to my notes here. There are some studies, very few studies, that show, by 6 weeks postpartum, 8 weeks postpartum, um, let me see this study. Sorry, blah, blah, blah. This study showed that 60% had DRA at 6 weeks postpartum, 45% had it at 6 months postpartum, and 32% had it at 12 months postpartum. Not a ton of info in this study, but this was the one that defined it as there was no ultrasound imaging. It was just palpation of 2-finger breaths at 4.5 centimeters above or 4.5 centimeters below. Um, hmm. Okay, this one study I love, which I've talked about um, in the past on a podcast. I think it was last season. Talked about deep core stability. There's group 1 and group 2. Group 1 had women that did deep core stabilizing work plus traditional ab exercises for 3 times a week for a total of 8 weeks. Group 2 just did traditional ab exercises 3 times a week for 8 weeks. The result was those in the deep core stabilizing exercise group, their interrectus distance decreased. They had it was, high statistically relevant decrease. So that tells me, hello, deep core stabilizers, hello, BIRTHFIT basics. Why would we not put this as our, first thing we do postpartum, um, as the foundation? All right. The other thing I wanted to say was there's one researcher out there that I particularly love. Her name is Diane Lee. And She did one study with, well, she's done a lot of studies, but she's done a study with Paul Hodge in 2016. It took 10 years to get published. And what they're doing for just DRA in the DRA research, they're like light years ahead of people. They're suggesting, and I strongly believe that the gap does not need to close to improve function or improve appearance. Now, I know a lot of women seek out support due to appearance, and they seek out programs or support to fix their DRA, and I say that in quotations. And this goes back to addressing mindset also, like mindset exercises. You know, if you're in that obstacle, that struggle right now, I want you to think about, instead of the fix, try to incorporate the word approximate or heal. And then what does healing your DRA look and feel like on the other side? What are you able to do when your DRA is healed that you're not able to do now? Are you able to play with your child, carry groceries, different things like that? That's where we get the wheels turning. And I think that, when women start to think along those lines, kind of outside the box thinking, um, it's pretty eye-opening. I freaking love it. So going back to Diane Lee, functionality, all her studies are done with ultrasound to view the tissue. Because she's definitely thinks, it's really hard to distinguish the edges and the border with your fingers when it's fully functioning. Like when I was talking about myself jumping up on the pull-up bar and it was like a doming instead of a ridge, it would have been really hard to differentiate the edges and the borders. Anyways, so functionality. Some of her work suggests that, the interrectus distance may actually be wider than before, and at the same time, be better, have a better function, be more capable. And I think that's really freaking cool. Diane Lee also agrees that you need force to demand more of the tissue. She also agrees that it's DRA's, the inability to transfer force. Yeah. Let me see if there's anything I missed. I'm checking my notes, y'all. I don't want to leave you hanging. So, okay. I don't know if I think I've had one client. No, she didn't. I'm trying to think when surgery is a decent option. If you do choose surgery, it needs to be positive. And I would say you're going to have to do the core work. You're going to have to do the rehab before and after. And then I would also say get a consultation and make sure somebody is able to measure you with guided ultrasound before even considering surgery. The other thing is, don't even think about surgery until you're done breastfeeding, at least 3 months. Allow the hormones to regulate. It's not gonna be consistent. Um, the other thing I forgot to mention earlier is when I'm looking at DRA, especially postpartum and healing, I want it to approximate from the top down, bottom up. And usually around the belly button is the last bit. And I don't even expect the last bit to happen if somebody's breastfeeding, just because of the relaxin and hormone and tissue regulation that needs to happen when breastfeeding commences. All right. The other cool thing I want to share is that the area of DRA often corresponds to an area of joint instability, specifically in the spine. This is just observance over my time as a chiropractor. Um, so if there's instability, let's say, in the T6 to T10 area, there's going to be kind of that upper linea alba DRA. If there's stuff going on in the lumbar spine, usually around belly button or just above, just below. If there's like SI joint pain, it's usually super low or stuff going on with a cesarean scar. By the way, if you have a cesarean scar, please massage that. Use some castor oil and please massage that. So anyways, yeah. Okay. I think, oh, the other thing I wanted to address. People always ask me about belts or belly binders. I don't necessarily believe in these. I don't think they're great. They're not great for collagen production. They're not great for teaching our core what to do. Um, we have to learn to support ourselves. We have to learn to manage our own internal pressure system. And basically, these things can act as a band-aid or a faux abdominal wall. They may absolutely be temporarily needed to get through the day if you have multiple kiddos or need to work or something, but understand that this is a crutch. This is a band-aid. You are not fixing the root of the issue. The other thing I've seen is there's usually, if just DRA. DRA is not really an inflammatory issue. There's kind of no inflammation involved. There's also, I haven't seen universal risk factors. The things that I've observed are, people with really poor movement habits and patterns. Very, like I mentioned earlier, training one-dimensionally, training predominantly in one plane of motion. Those are the biggest things I've seen. If you trained predominantly like terrible movement patterns before or sport specific before, yes, that's going to contribute. And what I mean by that is maybe you played volleyball, all through high school and college, and you were an outside hitter. You're definitely going to have some one-sided rib flare going on. Maybe you were a gymnast. You've got that arched back rib flare thing going on. And one of the things we prioritize initially is that neutral spine, rib cage stacked on the top of the pelvis, so the diaphragm and pelvic floor can line up together. And the breath has all the range of motion that it absolutely needs. No, life does not happen in a neutral spine motion or in a neutral spine type of setting. But that's where we rehab. That's where we prehab. That's where we lay the foundation. We have to get decent there before exploring all this beautiful movement. There is so much beautiful movement out there. So there we go. I think that's everything I wanted to say. Um, I did mention earlier, that there's no correlation, like, um, if you have DRA, you're gonna have back pain, or if you have DRA, you're gonna have something else. But there is a big percentage of women, with DRA that, have at least something else going on. And this could be urinary incontinence, this could be prolapse, this could be, um, lower back pain, hip pain, any of that. Um, and like I said, I strongly feel like DRA, it might have been present before, um, because it is a sign, a symptom of core and pelvic floor dysfunction. So, anyways, that's a ton of info. Um, Gosh, I don't think I hit on exercise and prevention because there's not a ton out there, but there's one study, and I forget where, I don't have the exact details of it, but there's one study that does suggest that deep core exercises do help to prevent or mitigate. Again, like I said, all the research is scant at best, and we need a ton more. But just in my thoughts and reflections is, okay, why would I not be doing the BIRTHFIT basics throughout my pregnancy and as the first thing postpartum? I mean, that's exactly what I've been doing, even when I was tired and fatigued during my first trimester, like weeks 7 through 9, BIRTHFIT basics and walking. That's what I concentrated on. That's what I will be doing first as the first movement postpartum. So I'd encourage you to check out the BIRTHFIT Basics postpartum program. Check out the BIRTHFIT Basics prenatal program. You don't need any equipment for any of these. Um, the BIRTHFIT Basics, like I said, are 15 movements and poses based on developmental kinesiology, based on foundational human movement. And I absolutely think every human being should be able to do these movements. It should be at their foundation. Um, so yeah, I don't know why you would go back to running without laying a solid foundation. Um, the other thing I'll say before I sign off is if you are about to give birth, if you are pregnant, or planning a postpartum period, like myself, I'm 35 weeks pregnant. I'm definitely planning a line-in period. Why? Because I know that rest, warmth, body work, nutrient-dense nourishment, and connection are really freaking healing and supportive for my hormonal blueprint. Yours too. It's biology. And if we can allow ourselves to rest at least 2 weeks in and around the bed, then 4 weeks, like 2 more weeks, 4 weeks total, in and around the house, our pelvic floor will thank us. We don't need to be running, jumping, fitnessing, exercising within that first month postpartum. Get outside, get some sunshine, maybe go walk to the mailbox and back. But by all means, like, give yourself permission to slow down, to pause, to nourish yourself, to reset, and to bond with baby. I promise it will have an everlasting effect on your health, and that includes your musculoskeletal system. All right, so I'm a little over an hour. My bad. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, please let me know. Go to our YouTube page, check out the videos on Diastasis Rectus Abdominis. You'll see how the assessment goes. You'll see kind of other thoughts and reflections there. And for our programs, just go to birthfit.com. That's the easiest place to find them. And I hope this episode was educational, informational, and got your wheels turning. All right. Thanks, y'all. We'll talk soon.